Sharing data in ArcGIS Online is awesome. It's really easy to do. But sometimes you might want to hide specific fields or even specific records of the data you want to share. And you can do that using feature layer views. This is kind of a hidden feature inside of ArcGIS Online. Let me show you how it works. I'm Sean Morgan, and this is my Spotlight on GIS. Here's the data we're going to explore. It's the provinces and territories of Canada. And you can see the data. It's all showing right now. So what I'm going to do is make it that you can only see specific data records, and in this case, the provinces. So I'll hide many of the provinces and show one or two. It's really easy to do, but before I do that, I just want to make sure a couple of key concepts make sense to you. So first of all, when you view the item information itself, you can of course go over to the data and see all the data that are there. And you can see here, 13 records exist, one for each province and territory of Canada. Now I can do the same if I actually go into the data itself, and I can actually open the record, I can query it, and I can do a REST endpoint query, and we'll return all fields and no geometries. And you can see each record comes back, including all of the individual fields inside of each record as well. Now, what would be ideal if we're sharing this to the public? We only want to show specific information like the names. So we can do that using this view. We can also remove some of the provinces or territories as we like. And basically what we're going to do is build a where clause so that every time the data is accessed, it's performing that where clause. So what we're going to do is let's make it that only Nova Scotia will show up, and that field is the pre-name. So pre-name equals, and you have to put that in quotes because it's text. And now if I retrieve it, you can see the only thing that comes back is that one province. Effectively, that's what we're going to be doing, but we're going to be doing it in a way that it can't be changed. It'll actually be accessing the data and making that the item can only see this one item. And we'll remove which fields. So we'll select which fields. So we want PR name, pre-name, and the second name. So effectively, this is what's going to show up inside of the actual record then as well. So as you can see, I can do that in the query, but if I reset all this, of course, I'll be able to access all the data. Now, if you're savvy, even if you're viewing the map here and you have that as a filter in the map itself, you would be able to grab the REST endpoint like I just did and then undo those queries and be able to get at all of the data. So for example, I can just go like this, and now I can see all of the data. And then if I tell it I want to retrieve all fields, I can of course get all of the fields back. So this is the problem if you have the data accessible at all as at the REST endpoint level. Anybody can get it if they're savvy enough. So this prevents it, the views. So let me start that process. So in the layer itself, if I go to the overview here, you'll notice that there's this create view layer. And in this, there's two options, view layer and join view layer. So you can actually join data doing this. I'm not going to go through that in this video. I'm just going to focus on the simple view layer to be able to restrict the data that I want to share, for example, with a group or the public. So the interface starts up. It says, okay, you want to share this layer. You can see my entire layer shows up here. That's correct. I want to show this one. I don't need to click on it. It's already selected. Next. And I want to add a couple of different things. And there's a whole bunch of different ways to be able to restrict it. First of all, we can add a filter. And I can add an expression to my filter. And what we're going to do, we're going to change this. And we're going to make it on the pre-name. And you can see it has a nice interface to be able to do this, so you don't even have to do it manually. We're going to make Nova Scotia show up. You can see the province shows up. And whichever province you pick, it highlights on the map to show you how the data is actually going to only show that. So everything else is grayed out except for the one that is going to show. So we'll leave it as Nova Scotia for our example here. Then we go back. The next thing is we could define an area of interest, and that allows us to specifically identify a particular area. And this will force only those records to show up, but I'm not going to do that at this time. The next is we're using the attributes to do it. The next is which fields you want to have visible. So you can just hit the X. This doesn't delete the field, but it does make it unavailable to this end map service. So we wanted to only show a few fields. So you want the French, English, both combined names. You can get rid of this. You notice FID always exists. That's the identifier. You must have it. So we have those 4 fields visible now. And we can go back here. And we can go next. It then asks us to create it. And basically, we're creating a new item in ArcGIS Online. We'll create it in that folder. And now what it's going to do is not copy the data. It is the original data. And what it's doing is it's making the data available as this new item, but it's adding those filters, that where clause that I basically generated, and also only showing those specific fields, just like I did with the REST endpoint. I excluded some data, but now this is doing it on the data side. So the database is getting published into the REST endpoint, and then the REST endpoint is getting used by ArcGIS Online, referenced by the item. This is actually getting done at the data level. So there is no way I can use any interface if I access it through this item to be able to get back the data that I have filtered out. So if you go take a look at the data, you can see only Nova Scotia appears. And if I go to my old data set, actually, if we hit refresh here, you'll see the new item. This is the view that was just created, and this is the original data set. And if I go back into the original data set and go to the data here, and if I go find Nova Scotia, and let's just change the name briefly for a second here. And if we go back to my view, and if I refresh this data, you can see the 2 data are linked. I changed the name, so no longer the data is visible, right? So if I go back to here, I said only give me where Nova Scotia, so I can't edit that field. We'll put that one back. That's why it's not accessing anything. We'll change the French name. Go back to here. Now the data will be back, and it will have that change. You can see everything is instant. So this data set is the same. It's just getting filtered in different ways by this view. So the 2 data sets are identical, and you can see that change. If I make it on the master data set, it's an instant change over here. So for dynamic data, this is a great way to be able to have it. Let's say your data is updated regularly. And only the fields show up that I have permitted for it to be seen. Like before, on the REST endpoint, if I retrieved all the data, I could get everything. On this view, if I go overview and I open up the REST endpoint in this one, and let's go, we'll just pop this out of this frame. And in here, we'll go to the data set itself, we'll query it, and we'll do 1 = 1. We'll return all fields, no geometries. You can see only 1 record comes back, and only those 4 fields are accessible. There is no way for me to get at the core data using the REST endpoint. The other thing I can do with this to help compartmentalize or share the data in a better way, if we go back to the content here, I actually have 2 items associated with this. So if I put this hosted view inside of a web map, only that one data layer will be available. And I can even change the permissions on just this one. For example, I could make it public. Therefore, this one could be public. Only Nova Scotia would be visible by the public, but my total data set, the Canada layer with all of its data, all of the fields, would be still accessible to whatever permissions I set. So you can actually split the permissions. And the back-end data are identical. They're still getting shared as the single data source. So if you modify that single data source, it reflects in all the views. Now, if you do make a mistake and want to change what you're taking a look at, you can do that in the view very easily. If you go view details on the view item under settings, you can see there is feature layer hosted view, and there's this update view. So I can go in and modify the settings that were there. So an example is I can change which province was visible. So next we'll go into this. We'll edit the filter and we'll change it to be Ontario now. Update that. It's updated. So now, like before, oops, this one, it was only showing Nova Scotia. Now, if it does this 1 = 1 query to return everything, now it only returns Ontario. And therefore, the data can be really, really secured in a particular way. If you add this to Web Map, no different like this one, I go add my content from the view. You can see only Ontario shows up in this layer, unlike the original one, which has everything within it. So this is a great way to secure your data. It's nice and easy to do. It's all configurable. And the beauty is you do not duplicate your data. It all is pointing to the same hosted feature layer stored in ArcGIS Online. Therefore, any updates to that data trickle down into all of the different views. I hope that feature is useful to you. Like, subscribe, and have a great day.